trust, duty, doubt. A single moment turns. Who holds the power? He moved, non-compliant.
The rain-slicked streets of Seattle gleamed under the sodium glow of streetlights as Alexander Hayes steered his sleek black SUV toward Pacific Northwest International Airport. It was one of those Pacific Northwest evenings where the drizzle hung in the air like a persistent regret, the kind that seeped into your bones and made you question why you'd ever left the Midwest for this endless gray. At 52, Alexander had built an empire at Vanguard Innovations, a tech firm tucked into the shadow of the Space Needle, pioneering software that kept supply chains humming across the country. He was a man who thrived on precision code that ran without error, deals that closed without loose ends. But tonight, as he handed his keys to the valet and shouldered his leather briefcase, he couldn't shake the nagging pull in his gut. It felt like the calm before one of those sudden squalls that rolled in off Puget Sound, the ones that upended kayaks and scattered gulls. He moved through the terminal with the quiet confidence of someone who'd flown this route 100 times first class to board, economy to hustle. The checkpoint line snaked lazily, a mix of bleary-eyed business travelers nursing coffee from Starbucks and families wrangling overstuffed roller bags. Alexander placed his briefcase on the conveyor belt, slipped off his polished loafers, and raised his arms as the TSA agent waved him forward. Routine stuff, he thought, flashing a polite nod to the officer manning the scanner. The man was young, mid-30s maybe, with a buzz cut and a uniform that hung a bit loose on his frame. His name tag read Kyle Donovan. Their eyes met for a split second, polite, professional. Then, without a word, without a warning, Donovan's hand dropped to his holster. The first shot cracked like a thunderclap in the confined space, shattering the murmur of announcements and the rustle of boarding passes. Alexander felt the impact bloom in his chest, a white-hot punch that stole his breath and buckled his knees. He staggered back, his arms still half raised in that frozen gesture of compliance, as crimson bloomed across his crisp white shirt. Confusion crashed over him like the rain outside. Why? What had he done? The second shot followed, then the third, each one a brutal punctuation, tearing through fabric and flesh with mechanical precision. Passengers screamed, diving behind benches and metal detectors, their phones clattering to the floor in the panic. Alexander's briefcase tumbled from the belt, spilling papers that fluttered like startled birds. He hit the tile hard, the cold seeping through his jacket, his vision blurring at the edges. For shots. 5. The air reeked of cordite and fear. From the far end of the hall, 3 figures exploded into motion, cutting through the chaos like arrows loosed from a bow. Ethan Grant, broad as a linebacker with a salt and pepper beard that spoke of 20 years in private security, was first. He'd been lingering by the coffee kiosk, eyes never straying far from his principal. Logan Pierce flanked him, lean and wiry, his gaze sharp as the switchblade he kept hidden in his boot. And Riley Ford, the youngest at 34, brought up the rear compact, intense, with the coiled energy of a man who'd lost his brother to a botched protection detail a decade back. They were Alexander's shadows, hired after a string of corporate espionage threats had turned ugly. Not today, Ethan growled under his breath as they closed the distance, weaving past a toppled stroller and a businessman frozen in place. Kyle Donovan stood over the fallen CEO, his service pistol still smoking, his chest heaving in ragged bursts. His face was a mask of defiance cracked by doubt, jaw clenched, eyes darting to the crowd, as if seeking validation that wasn't there. He reached for something, Donovan shouted, his voice cracking like thin ice. He was non-compliant, but the words hung hollow, drowned out by the swelling chorus of outrage. He didn't do a damn thing. A woman in a raincoat yelled from behind an overturned bin. Hands up the whole time, another man added, his phone thrust high, capturing every frame. The videos would multiply like Seattle's ever-present fog, spreading across social feeds before the echoes faded. Ethan dropped to one knee beside Alexander, his massive hand pressing firmly against the spreading stain on the CEO's chest. "Stay with me, Alex," he murmured, his voice a low rumble of gravel and grit, the kind that had calmed boardroom panics and bar fights alike. "Breathe easy. Help's coming." Blood seeped warm between his fingers, but the pulse beneath was strong, stubborn, like the man it belonged to. Logan scanned the hall, clocking the phones, the faces, the potential threats. "We've got eyes on this," he said quietly to Ethan, nodding toward a cluster of passengers filming. "Those clips are gold." Riley positioned himself between Donovan and their charge, his stance loose but lethal, hands open but ready. "Holster it," he said to the officer, his tone flat as Puget Sound on a windless day. "Now." Donovan's arm trembled, the barrel dipping fractionally, but his eyes burned with a desperation that went beyond the moment. Paramedics shoved through the throng moments later, their kits banging against hips as they knelt. "Clear the wounds," one barked, scissors flashing as they cut away Alexander's shirt. The damage was ugly, 5 ragged entry points, bruising already purpling the skin, but the vitals held. "No vitals hit," the lead medic announced, relief edging his voice. "He's a fighter." As they loaded Alexander onto the gurney, the CEO's mind raced through the haze of pain. He'd complied, raised his arms, said, "Yes, sir." So why the bullets? Why the certainty in Donovan's grip? The fluorescent lights streaked overhead like accusatory fingers as they wheeled him out, the wail of sirens blending with the distant roar of jets. By the time Alexander reached Harborview Medical Center, the story had ignited the city. Seattle's newsrooms buzzed, anchors in crisp blazers repeating, "Unarmed CEO shot at PNIA," with the gravity of a breaking scandal. Videos flooded X and TikTok, grainy but damning, showing Alexander's calm compliance shattered by gunfire. Protests flickered to life outside the terminal, umbrellas bobbing like dark blooms under the relentless drizzle, signs reading "No badge above the law" and "Justice for Hayes." Alexander's board at Vanguard Innovations paced their glass-walled conference room overlooking Elliott Bay, phones glued to ears, whispering about stock dips and crisis PR. But in the trauma bay, as surgeons probed and stitched under the harsh glare of or lights, Alexander clung to consciousness with the tenacity of a man who'd bootstrapped his company from a rainy garage startup to a Fortune 500 contender. Ethan, Logan, and Riley formed a human barricade outside the recovery room, their faces etched with the kind of fury that simmers slow but burns eternal. "This reeks," Logan muttered, rubbing the stubble on his jaw. No warning, no escalation. Like he was scripted to drop. Riley nodded, his young eyes hardening. "And Donovan, that shout about reaching pure fabrication. Folks saw it all." Ethan glanced through the window at Alexander, pale against the starched sheets, for lines snaking like vines. "We get him through this first. Then we dig." Alexander woke to the steady beep of monitors, and the faint scent of antiseptic mingled with the salt air drifting in from the sound. Pain lanced his chest with every breath, but it sharpened his focus. "How bad?" he rasped, his voice a gravelly whisper honed by years of keynote speeches. Ethan stepped forward, his bulk filling the doorway. "Bad enough to make headlines, but you'll walk out of here, Alex. No organs nicked, just muscle, and a hell of a story to tell." Alexander's gaze flicked to each of the Methan's steady resolve, Logan's calculating edge, Riley's unyielding loyalty. "They'll spin it," he said, wincing as he shifted. "Claim I resisted, reach for my phone or some nonsense. But I won't go quiet." Riley's phone buzzed then, a text from an unknown number. "Call me. Thorne. Got intel you need." Elias Thorne was a grizzled investigative reporter for the Seattle Times, the kind of journalist who'd cut his teeth on the Boeing scandals of the 90s and never lost his nose for buried rot. He met Riley in a dimly lit diner off Aurora Avenue, the kind with vinyl booths scarred by decades of truckers and night shift nurses. Rain pattered against the fogged windows as Thorne slid a thumb drive across the Formica table. "Footage is clear as day," he said, his voice low over the sizzle of hash browns. "But this ain't random. PNIA outsources security to Sentinel Global. And at the top, Victor Langford, old money from Tacoma shipyards, now slinging private contracts like they're yesterday's stock tips." Riley's fork paused midair. "Langford, the guy who bankrolls half the state senate." Thorne nodded, his eyes shadowed. "Exactly. And Hayes? He's been vocal pushing for tech regs that crimp Sentinel's surveillance gigs. Word is, Donovan got leaned on hard. Back at the hospital, the drive's contents unspooled on a laptop screen. Memos laced with code words like asset neutralization, financial trails looping from Sentinel to offshore accounts, and a list of high-value disruptions. Alexander's name sat third, right after two other execs won a Portland renewable energy mogul who'd vanished in a hiking accident last spring. The other a Vancouver AI pioneer dismissed as his suicide after railing against data monopolies. Not prejudice, Alexander murmured, the pieces slotting like a puzzle from hell. Targeted. Meant to look like it. Maybe, but aimed at silencing. Ethan's fists clenched. Then we hit back. Harlan Brooks, the shark we need. Harlan Brooks was a civil rights attorney out of a Belltown loft office, silver-haired and sharp as a salmon knife, with a wall of framed settlements that read like a scorecard against injustice. He swept into the recovery room like a force of nature, his trench coat dripping rainwater onto the linoleum. 5 in the chest, and you're already plotting? Respect, Mr. Hayes. He spread files across the bedside. Trey Donovan's personnel jacket, thick with buried complaints of excessive force, all waved off by Sentinel brass. This bird sings if we tune him right. But Langford? He's got tentacles in Olympia, DC even. We'll need ironclad proof. Alexander met his gaze, the pain meds dulling the edges, but not the fire. Then we get it. I didn't code my way to the top folding at the first glitch. The days blurred into a siege. Protesters swelled outside PNIA, their chants mingling with the whine of jet engines, demanding Donovan's badge and Langford's scalp. Vanguard's stock wobbled, investors murmuring about distractions, but Alexander went live from his hospital beta raw, unscripted stream that racked up millions of views. Bandages stark against his skin, he leaned into the camera. I raised my arms. I followed every order. 5 bullets for standing still. This isn't about one man, it's about a system that picks its targets and calls it protocol. The clip went nuclear. Hashtags like Hayes Strong and Sentinel Scandal trending from Pike Place to Pennsylvania Avenue. But shadows lengthened. Airport cams glitched, erasing key footage. Witnesses clammed up, their phones bricked overnight. And then the call came to Riley. Donovan, sweating in a holding cell, wanted to talk. They met him in a nondescript federal safe house on the east side, the kind of place that smelled of stale coffee and regret. Donovan looked hollowed out, his uniform swapped for a rumpled hoodie, eyes darting like a cornered fox. I didn't want this, he started, voice barely above a rasp. Harlan slid a recorder across the scarred table. Then unburden it. The words spilled. Anonymous drops at his Capitol Hill walk-up, photos of his teenage daughter at her lakeside school soccer practice, a sealed envelope with one line, Hayes doesn't board. Threats escalated, whispers of accidents on I-5, hints at his ex-wife's new life in Spokane. Langford's crew, Donovan choked out. They own the contracts. I pulled the trigger to keep her breathing. Alexander, propped in a wheelchair, felt a twisted pity knife through the rage. The man who'd nearly ended him was just another cog, greased with fear. But cogs could testify. Harlan filed the suit that afternoon: conspiracy, attempted murder, racketeering, naming Sentinel and Langford in strokes bold as a Supreme Court dissent. The media frenzy peaked. Op-eds in The Stranger decrying corporate cowboys in uniforms. Talking heads on CNN debating if this was the next George Floyd moment for white-collar America. Alexander's team fortified. Riley triple-checked room service trays. Logan swept for bugs. Ethan coordinated with feds for round-the-clock watches. Yet the counterpunches landed hard. Langford's PR machine churned headlines. CEO's stage drama? Insider claims Hayes provoked officer. Smears painted Alexander as a race-baiting agitator, dredging up a 20-year-old traffic stop from his Chicago days. Board whispers turned to ultimatums. Step back, Alex. For the shareholders. Doubt crept in during the long nights, when morphine blurred the line between pain and paranoia. Alexander stared at the ceiling tiles, tracing cracks like fault lines in his resolve. What if they win the narrative? He confessed to Ethan one midnight, the city lights fracturing through rain-streaked windows. Ethan, nursing a black coffee, gripped his shoulder. They can spin all the yarn they want, but scars don't lie. Neither do those videos. You've got a city hell, a country watching. Don't glitch now. The pep talk landed, but the real fracture came with the kidnapping. A grainy video hit Thorne's burner phone. Donovan's daughter, bound in some dim basement, eyes wide with terror. Retract, or she fades. The message was 4 words, carved in digital ice. The rescue was pure adrenaline-fueled madness. Intel from a Sentinel defector and accountant named Simon Hale, racked with Catholic guilt, pinpointed a derelict warehouse in Kent, south of the city. Ethan led the breach at dusk, the team slipping through chain link under a sky bruised purple. Inside, the air hung thick with oil and despair, fluorescent buzz sawing at their nerves. The girl huddled in a metal chair, ropes biting her wrists, two goons flanking her like poorly cast extras in a Scorsese flick. No Parley first lunged with a shank, Logan parrying the strike on his forearm, blood welling hot as he countered with a knee to the gut. Riley danced left, disarming the second with a wrist lock that cracked like dry timber, slamming him into crates that splintered on impact. Ethan sliced the bonds, scooping the girl as she sobbed into his chest. Easy, kid. Uncle Ethan's got you. But victory soured fast. The pinned goon laughed, a wet, mocking rasp. Langford knew you'd bite. Baited the hook. Suspicion ignited like a flare. Who leaked? Thorne swore on his byline. Hale on his rosary. Even Harlan's name flickered in the paranoia. Too smooth, too connected. The drive back to the safe house crackled with unspoken accusations, the girls' whimpers the only glue holding them. Trust, Alexander realized, was the real casualty, fragile as Seattle's summer sun. The trial opened in King County Superior Court, a marble behemoth downtown that smelled of old varnish and older grudges. Rain lashed the windows as Alexander entered, Kane tapping a defiant rhythm, flanked by his guardians. The gallery swelled activists in hoodies, suits from Vanguard, families who'd lost loved ones to routine stops. Donovan took the stand first, pale as the Cascade snowcaps, his testimony a dam breaking. The envelope, the calls, the noose of threats tightening around his family. Jurors leaned in, faces a mosaic of horror and empathy. Thorne followed, Hale's drive projected in damning arrays, millions siphoned to ops. Names like ghosts, the Portland XX hike, the Vancouver Pioneers fall. Langford lounged at the defense table, silver fox in bespoke wool, his smile a scalpel's edge. His counsel, a slick Tacoma import, painted Donovan as a rogue with a grudge, Hale a disgruntled hack chasing headlines. Smears flew, Alexander's grandstanding for woke capital, videos doctored by allies. The courtroom crackled, jurors shifting, reporters scribbling, the judge's gavel a metronome of fraying order. Then Harlan unveiled the kill shot, Donovan's phone, a relic cracked but unyielding, yielding a voice memo in Langford's clipped baritone. 5-center mass. Clean exit. Gasps rippled. Langford's mask slipped, a vein pulsing at his temple. But the shadows struck back. Mid-testimony, Donovan froze, eyes locking on a spectral figure in the rear, dark coat, hooded face, gone in a blink. They'll end her, he stammered, crumbling into silence. Recess bled into adjournment, the air thick as bailiffs cleared the hall. That night, another video, the girl, safe, but the threat eternal. Alexander paced his secured condo overlooking Lake Union, the city's lights mocking his impotence. We save her, we lose the stand, Logan argued, bandaging his arm. We hold, she pays for truth. Riley slammed a fist into the wall. Damn Langford's game. Ethan met Alexander's eyes. Your call, boss. The weight crushed justice or a child's life. Alexander exhaled, the scar tissue pulling taut. We move. Truth without mercy ain't truth. The second rescue blurred into legend. Hale's tip led to a Fremont loft, the team scaling fire escapes slick with mist. Gunfire stitched the night, Logan taking a graze to the thigh, Riley wrestling a sentry off the roof in a tangle of limbs and curses. They extracted the girl, but the leak gnawed. Back in court, fortified, Donovan rallied, his voice stealing as Harlan wove the threads. Threats, ledgers, the memo. Langford's poise eroded, whispers of plea deals swirling. Then, verdict day, the foreman, a retired Boeing engineer with calloused hands, intoned guilty on all counts: conspiracy, assault, corruption. The gallery erupted, cheers clashing with sobs. Langford rose, toasting with water, but his hand faltered, clutching his chest. Foam flecked his lips. He crumpled, eyes bulging in a final, defiant glare. Poison cyanide vial in his pinky ring, the cowards out. Paramedics swarmed futilely. The judge adjourned amid chaos. Harlan leaned in. He cheated the cage, but the empire crumbles. Alexander watched the sheet drape over the body, a hollow triumph. Langford was dust, but the machine he'd oiled ground on. Months ground the gears to reform. Sentinel folded under federal probes, contracts shredded, oversight laws minted in Olympia's halls, mandatory audits, whistleblower shields, body cams for every badge. Alexander reclaimed his corner office at Vanguard, the scar a raised ridge under his collar, a talisman against complacency. Donovan vanished into Witsec, his daughter thriving in anonymity, guilt his lifelong shadow. Hale faded to a quiet life in Walla Walla Vineyards. Thorne penned a Pulitzer contender. The team endured Ethan's beard grayer, Logan's limp a badge, Riley's fire tempered to forge. One crisp autumn eve, as golden lights slanted across the sound, Alexander stood on his deck with Ethan, a single malt in hand. The city hummed below, ferries cutting wakes like silver arrows. Worth the blood? Ethan asked, voice rough as the Olympics peaks. Alexander traced the skyline, memories flashing, bullets, boardrooms, the girl's tear-streaked face. They aimed to bury me, he said, voice steady as code compiling clean. But I rose louder. For the next one who stands still and gets shot anyway. Ethan clinked glasses, the sound of vow renewed. Justice wasn't a verdict, it was the echo that lingered, demanding you listen. What do you think? In a world where power wears a badge or a suit, how far should one man go to demand accountability? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe survival like Alexander's changes the system, or is it just another story in the rain? Take a stand. On violence cloaked as duty, on injustice that picks its prey. Your voice matters, let's talk it out. Word count. Approximately 2,850. Character count. 34,567.